All right, so guys, it's time for me to catch up on some prompts with you this morning. And I thought what I would do, now that you're familiar with the marking process, is just read the prompt first, mark it the way that I think you would see it, maybe block it out if it's Q1, and then talk a little bit about the artwork, so what you would do with it. So I'm trying to speed this up for you so you have plenty of content to look at over the weekend, okay? So as soon as I start, there go the dogs. It's all good. Because I've got my trusty Flair pens and all of them bright, pretty pastel colors, and I can just write away. Okay. So this was a practice blocking and marking situation where we had a prompt on luxury objects. Okay. So I'm going to read this, like I said, and we're going to get going. Artists often create luxury objects to signify the importance and power of a particular patron through the use of specific iconography and materials. The images shown feature a luxury object from your required course content. Select and identify another work of art considered to be a luxury item that utilizes specific iconography and materials that reflect the patron's power and social status. You may select from the list below or any other relevant work. Describe the distinct iconography, symbolism, and imagery from the work shown and your selected work that conveys the power of a particular patron using specific visual evidence. Explain one formal similarity between the required work shown and your selected object that indicates both patrons are of a wealthier, higher social class. Using specific visual and/or contextual evidence, explain one difference between the required work shown and your selected object and how the choice of media helps fulfill the distinct aim of its patron. What would have been the likely effect of these works on the viewer seeing them used by the original patron? Use specific contextual evidence in your response from the required work shown and your selected object. Now, what they've identified for us is the Merovingian looped fibula is the thing that's required, and they've given us some options at the bottom: the Pyxis of Almagira, the screen with the Siege of Belgrade, and its hunting scene. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to do this quickly and annotate, remembering to speak as I go. Okay, so basically what we have here is an intro, tells me the theme. Here, I know I've got identification information. Guys, there's no task here. Even though I wrote this with select and identify, I'm seeing now just like select by itself in the sample prompts. So we don't really get any like additional points for that. Okay. So let's move ahead here. I know that I've got my list of things down here because that's part one. I'm going to go ahead and say that I've read that, I've read this, and I know what I can choose from. Let's get in here with the verbs. Okay, describe, explain. I need to focus a little bit, looks like. So let's see here. I'm kind of blurry today. There we go. That's better. Okay. And moving on with verbs, explain. What would have been the likely effect of those words? When you don't see a verb there, you're being asked a question, we can always go, that means explain. So this looks like a pretty stout little question. Okay, so I know I've got 4 action words there. I now need to go and find the other aspects of the question. Okay, I think, guys, in all honesty, I've been emphasizing finding the points a little too much. Wouldn't it be just as effective to like make sure you've answered all parts of the question? I mean, somebody above my pay grade is going to assign where the points go, in all honesty. So if I can just make sure I have attacked this well enough that I know all of the things I have to do, then I'm going to be fine. So let's look. Some connector words. Oh, if they do this, you better know that. I see another connector word, and it wasn't underlined or highlighted. I see both. I see and or. I see and bolded again. This is kind of random, Mr. J. I should have written these a little bit better, right? But we can still use it. It's just fine. You spit it and. Okay. Now, do I have any hows or whats? I got one right there. Okay. What have been used? You can kind of see, I'm just going over this whole thing, making sure that I understand its structure, right? I haven't really gotten into the ideas that we have to talk about yet, so we will get there. Next thing that we need to do, did I miss anything? Don't see anything. Okay. I like what some of you did with similarity and difference. scratch that or highlight that. That's a difference. I'm assuming that this is a similarity because they want us to talk about this question between both works. So they're both doing this, right? So I'm going to put in similarity and underline it. Okay. So similarity, difference, similarity. And this is all description. Okay. So now we know verbs. We now know connectors. Describe the iconography, symbolism, and imagery. Okay. I'm going to underline that. From the work shown and your selected work that conveys the power of a particular patron. Okay. Symbolism and imagery tied to power of your patron. Okay. And we have to use VE. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call that T1, T2. And I've got magic of 3 ideas popping out at me all over the place. Here we go. Moving on. Explain one formal similarity between the required work shown and your selected object that indicates that both patrons are of a wealthier. Okay, so this is going to be the lux factor, right? Luxury, luxury, luxury. Did you notice this? That's a pretty important word. I can't talk about subject matter. I have to talk about how this thing was designed and arranged. So that's kind of interesting. Let me adjust this camera a little bit so I can get a little more comfortable as we talk today. Okay, there we go. So, okay, that's going to be, we're going to come back to that shortly. That means visual evidence, but it means with form more than anything else, right? Moving on, one difference between the required work shown and your selected and how the choice of media, what it's made of, helps fulfill what the patron's trying to do. Okay, they're trying to say, I am super, super hot stuff. Then how does that work with that? All right, so what would have been the likely effect of those works on the viewer seeing them used by the original patron? The effect on the viewer, right? What are you supposed to feel when you see this? And then contextual evidence from both. Okay. This is either or. We can do visual or we can do with contextual. That is form. That is VE. Okay. So now I think I'm ready to map this out real quick. I know my theme is on luxury items and materials, but I'm going to start with description. Okay, dot, 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 dot. This is all about symbolism and imagery, iconography, right? Iconography. And this is tied to patron and their power. Power, patron. Power, patron, okay? So obviously I'm writing this out. You guys don't have time, right? 25 minutes goes by fast, but there's my T1, T2 just for demonstration. Similarity between the two works. Both patrons are wealthy. So how do these two things work together around the idea of cha-ching? Okay, and we have to use form. This is really important. Form. Form, guys, are the elements of art. You know, what color is it? What texture is it? How is the iconography arranged to emphasize the point? So both of these are doing that, and we've got to talk about that. Moving on, explain one difference now, right? Okay. Explain one difference between the required work and how the choice of media, right? Whoops, I skipped one. No, I didn't. That's right. Okay, so wealthier, higher class, choice of media. This is the media helping the patron do what it needs. We can use VE or CE, right? So we're okay there. I'm going to review 1, 2. This is my T3. Here's my T4, right? Okay, so I think we're good. T3, you just have to stop and look and make sure you're covering all parts of that question. The last part here looks like a question with 2 supporting pieces of evidence. So I am looking, why would it be okay? So I know I have to answer that question. And because it's asking about both of the works doing this, I'm going to put that in there. Oh, it is so hard to see all of the page. I think I'm just going to have to zoom out and refocus. Okay, actually, there we go. Okay, so now explain the effect on the viewer. Okay, what was the viewer thinking when they saw both of these works? I'm thinking there has to be a similarity here. Maybe they were impressed by the luxury, or they were impressed by the symbolism. It's a stake on power. You basically take it anywhere. But I have to back this up with significant evidence down here, specific evidence that could be contextual, right? So now you can see what we've got to do here. The work number one, number two. I'm going to say that is T5, T6, T7. Okay. So you can do this much faster than I can trying to explain it all the way through. But let me show you at this point. You guys should probably have your notes, which looks something like this, right? Where you have everything. Now, I printed this out before I started the video, right? You would have to have this pre-printed ahead of time, because if you sat here trying to print all this stuff, you would spend half your time writing on doing nothing but processing tech. I just want to put this in front of you guys because I gave you this online too. These are PDFs of student annotations from Miss Russell. And if you want to look at them online, you can just check them to see that you're not missing anything significant that might be helpful. Or you can use them if your notes are like somewhere in Timbuktu and you can't get to them. These are there for you, but you just have to know that you need to like access them ahead of time. So looking at these works, just in terms of a content review, guys, this is a brooch, for lack of a better word. It holds on a cape. It's known as a fibula, and fibulas were known in the Roman times forward. So everybody who had a heavy cloak usually had some kind of clasp to hold it on. So we know its function. This is heavily ornamented, though, and it has filigree as well as cloisonne. Very specific kinds of functions, very specific kinds of decoration that not everybody's going to get their hands on. These are gold. The garnet stones are red. There's a fish and a couple of crosses and some eagles everywhere. So we've got a lot of symbolism that we could talk about. Of course, this is about the power of the patron. Well, the eagle is a Roman symbol, right? So that could be a claim on Roman power and authority. The fish might be a reference to the emerging Christianity of the time period, where people kind of wanted to hedge their bets, saying they're both pagan and Christian. The cross helps us out a little bit there. The symbolism of repetitive things. Not sure what to do with that. But you definitely can tell the dense amount of detail was meant for someone who was highborn or of social class. So got to remember too, that this is probably, according to gardeners, found on a queen's body. So this is a female that's wearing this, not a male. And it was found in a burial mound, okay, where the remains of the figure were there, person were there, along with this thing that survived. You got to be darn confident if you can just like part with this amount of wealth and put it into the ground. You're always assuming that there's going to be more wealth later. So that gives you just some ideas on context for the Merovingian loop fibula. The Pyxis of Almagira, let me see here. I've got my image. We talked about that being part of a palace complex where you literally would go into a special room called the Salon de Rico in Medinet al-Zahra, which was the palace of, I think, Abd el-Rahman III. I'm trying to remember that patron. He was trying to reunify his Abbasid and Umayyad lands by putting imagery here that definitely speaks to what he was hoping for. It was a gift to his son, and it kind of blesses Al-Mughira's reign with text and imagery that is very, very hopeful about what the young ruler might do. So looking at this, first, you got to remember, you would be inside the palace, inside a wonderful room. You'd be smelling wonderful aromatic fragrances coming out of this thing. And then you would realize as you got closer, ooh, that thing is made of solid ivory. This guy's got a lot of money. If you were looking at the screen with the Casino Belgrade, this is the work from New Spain, where the viceroy with a cross-eyed face basically created this thing as a new kind of art form that merged both Asian as well as European kinds of ideas. So it was a divider. We only have half of it. You guys can see the border over here, right? In Brooklyn, they have half of it. I think the rest of it's in Spain. But it was highly prized because of the technique, which is a enconchada technique, where you use mother of pearl in the surface and then you paint on top of the surface. It gives a real rich sparkle to the artwork. So it screams luxury across the room. People coming to see the Viceroy would see this battle scene where his family played a role in securing the border of Europe from the attacks from the Ottoman Turks. They had taken over Belgrade. His forebears are attacking the castle, and this will be a big win for the Christian Europe at the time. At the bottom, we see a different scene, which would have been on the side where the ladies in waiting were. And it is more pastoral. It's not nearly as violent and aggressive. If I had a color picture, you would see pastels, you would see greens and blues, and you would see people enjoying their life in nature, knowing full well this could only be experienced by the rich, right? So we've got a lot of information here that will help us with this question. It just matters what you choose after that, right? So taking the Pyxis of Almagira first, if you compare that to this, we could talk about the power of a particular patron. I think we've described it well enough. Let's move on to T3 here. Indicates both patrons of a wealthier, higher social class. Well, come on. The amount of effort to, take this thing and carve it from a solid chunk of ivory shows you that these guys really wanted to cover every square inch with imagery that would support his reign. You could say the same thing is done here with the filigree that we see in the background, the cloisonné, where you have the little separations. That's what cloisonné means in French, where you've got molten glass that's been poured into each of the partitions. Those are ideals basically that work fairly well with trying to show that these guys were wealthy. They had money. Choice of media, the luxury items, I think that's pretty clear and easy to do. Effect on the viewer, okay? If someone were walking around and had one of these brooches on, you would assume that it probably cost the paycheck of a large council of people. These cultures didn't build architecture. They were too busy running from Vikings. They basically put all of their luxury on their bodies. So this is literally like wearing your paycheck, or wearing the paycheck of about 30 different men at council. So you would know immediately this person has power and authority based on that amount of bling, right? You've got no physical architecture or anything else to spend your money on. This is the best way to say you were powerful, right? Here, the aspirations inside the Salon de Rico, inside all of this imagery. We basically know that with imagery here in an Islamic context, this is meant for private viewing. It was meant basically for people who knew how to read it, not as imagery or icon. So it's basically of the higher class. If we had seen it, we would be like immersed in awe at the ability of someone to have all of this luxury around them. And basically, you can compare it that way. So I hope that's helpful. If you do the screen of Belgrade, I think it's fairly simple too. So these were good luxury works to choose. If you went off list, you got to realize I'd only advise that if you had something super, super nice from Content Area 8 or a global contemporary artist. And right now, I'm not able to really think of anything off the top of my head that would work here. So this might be a great suggestion to stick with what you have here in the rubric, okay? So guys, we've put a lot of information here in front of you. I hope that helps you with the structure of this thing. I've got several more to do with you today, so I'm going to drop it here and move on to the next thing, okay?